Okay. All right. Welcome to the Shop Class Podcast. All right. Tonight we got a special topic. We're going to talk about the diesel industry, the skills gap between, having not enough young people entering the diesel mechanics market. According to a lot of people, according to Jim Park, who's a reporter, he's going to visit us maybe later in the program. But there's a call from the industry saying, where are all the technicians? That part we're going to handle, and also the transition from diesel to electric, and maybe even from electric to automated. So that, even though that might be 10 or 20 or 30 years out, it's starting to happen already. And the interesting thing is that some of the old manufacturers like Dana Axles are starting to acquire and buy up all the electric motor companies and combine them. So anyway, to cover that tonight, we got Gary Bronson. He's a heavy truck shop teacher from Ohio, Great Oaks. And we also got Hodge. He's interested in he's a solar, I guess, installer, right? Is that what you did before? And he's gonna convert one of those, RV camper van things, but instead it's gonna be like a bus, but it's all electric. So it's a pretty ambitious project. And then we got a regular crew of shop teachers in here: Matt, Tim, Duke, Nick, Daniel. Actually, Daniel, I don't think is a shop teacher, but he joined in because he might be changing uh, his dirt bike to electric. And then Jim Park is supposed to join us. But anyway, so we'll get into it. So let's talk to Gary for a second. Gary's over there in Great Oaks. Here's the school, and so you're now during COVID. You've been open the whole time, Gary.
Yeah, we have for CT career tech programs. Academics were being done remote until about a month ago.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha. All right, someone's joining in, and what do you think? Do you hear the same thing, that there's not enough uh, people entering the diesel mechanics industry?
Well, definitely. There's going to be so many retirements. The shortage is unreal, and everybody is scrambling. I just get
Really?
called constantly, needing help, and I have more positions than my students can fill, and it's a big issue. I
Wow.
did go to Skills USA last weekend, the state competition, and they had an American Diesel Training Academy, and it's a new upstart school that's only been around about 2 years, and they're addressing the shortage very well. I should say they do 5-week courses, and they're partnering directly with a lot of companies also, and they do some kind of social funding that I found was very interesting. They do not do government loans. It's backed with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they don't make any payment until they obtain a job afterwards. So they're
Oh,
really helping.
really? That's
Yeah,
motivation right there.
yeah.
Oh, wait, what's this? Skills USA?
Skills USA. We had we were one of the few contests that were in person this year. Most were done remote or just testing. Actually, every year we would go to state and compete, and they'll have job stations set up, like a brake station, electrical station, trailer PM, truck PM, engine station, job interview station, and then they're
Where,
scored at each of those stations.
where should I go to show that? Is that Career Essentials, or let's see?
I'm not sure
Yeah.
where we would find a
All right.
um, commercial truck
All right. No problem. Maybe Matt can
competition.
help me out with that. Um, so yeah, so that's pretty cool. So that, yeah, I mean, so there is a gap now. It's pretty interesting because I mean, diesel's how the whole country moves around. Now, someone who's listening to this who's interested in electric vehicles, what I say is that the skills it takes, learning about hydraulics, learning about suspension systems, brakes, steering, chassis, electrical, to me, it's all the same. You know, if you're getting into like an electric motor situation, well, it's just a bigger starter motor, right? So
Right.
like when you go to start the engine, that starter, that kick that replaced, you standing in the mud cranking over the engine back in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang days, that's the same thing. It's just batteries hooked up to an electric motor that turns over the crank. But instead of having a diesel engine there, you might have an electric motor with a huge bank of batteries, So that's why I say, there is a transition, but the the skills of being a diesel mechanic are still relevant. I think, in my eyes.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I try to teach mechanics. It may be diesel mechanics, but we've had engines in that did engine swaps. It doesn't matter whether there's gasoline running to it or diesel. I'll bring in a sweeper if we're putting a meter on it. And there's so many things that applies if you know how to use an electric meter on a sweeper or a generator or an alternator or whatever it may be. It all applies. So there's so many learning opportunities, and I think diesels get a little bit of a bad rap here with our latest emissions and things. You can actually breathe the exhaust coming out of them. They're so clean anymore. I wouldn't breathe it for days on end, but um, they do give us quite a bad rap from the old two-stroke days.
Yeah. And
Belch and
also,
smoke and rolling coal, and kids want to do that because that's cool, but that's not where we're at. We're I think the U.S. is really on top of things emission wise.
oh, interesting. Okay. And what about like, when just to address the rolling coal, like, from my understanding, what they do is they change the computer parameters so it gives too much fuel or something like that. Is that why
Yeah,
it does
there's
that?
so many things they can do. They can change the injectors and nozzles. Black smoke is either lack of air or too much fuel. So
That's not fact. That is not the factory settings, right?
no. And I'm not a real big one on cranking things up because reliability goes out the window. I had a performance jet boat back when I was in my 20s, loud, rude, and crude. But, I usually didn't make it past July before there was a rod hanging out the bottom of the boat. And then I'd spend all winter getting it going again. But I was cool. So
Yeah, yeah,
I like quiet now in my old age and comfort. So.
yeah.
Uh, the reliability does really go out the window, and that's why warranties are voided when you go cranking things up. And I can't and I wouldn't teach kids how to delete EGRs or anything like that. It's illegal for one, and like the Diesel brothers got a big fine over that here, a couple $1 million or something is what I understand.
Yeah, the Diesel brothers are the ones, for some reason, they took the brunt of the
Right.
lashback for the rolling coal issue, even though it's not them doing every truck. They just, yeah.
Yeah, they were publicly doing it. You can work around all those things, but the odd thing is, when a lot of this equipment, we've bore the cost of all the emission systems here, and as soon as that piece of equipment gets sent to a third world country, they're ripping all of those emission systems off.
Right.
So I don't agree with that. That's not really fair in the long run. They should be doing their part also.
Yeah. So, like, if you got a oh, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, the kids were talking about, because I'm rural area too, rolling coal and all that. I said, and I told them, the guys, I said, hey, you know what girls say every time you do that? And they're like, what? I said, nothing. They don't care. Quit doing it.
Right.
That's funny.
Yeah, is that hooked up to a switch or is that like that all the time?
Oh, that's a good question. Can you just turn it on?
Well, when they get on it, and they're delivering too much fuel to it or power breaking it or something like that, yeah, it's going to be a lot more noticeable.
Listen, I'm not above it. If I had a switch and I could roll call, I think I would.
Well, it's unburnt fuel. I mean, that's money going out.
I would just do it.
That's money going out the tailpipe.
I would not do it the way they do it in people's faces. That's not. I mean, come on. That's not. Right. It's like punching someone and running. Like, come on, dude. Come on.
It's definitely noticeable though when someone does it. You're like, wow, look at
that. That's so funny. But see, that's the this is the irony of the situation that I try and explain to people, is that the people that know how to modify those vehicles to make them do something terrible like that, they're the same people that could clean it up. They're the same people that know how to do this.
Right.
They can maintain the vehicle. They know how to modify it. They could probably get more performance out of it, burning less fuel. So perfect example is a good segue. Gary, in your shop, before we started recording, you were telling us that you're actually doing a biodiesel situation where you're using used vegetable oil to run a diesel engine.
Right. Multiple diesel engines. I mean, my goal is to have my whole shop running on diesel fuel, or not diesel fuel, biofuel. You know, like my pressure washer runs on diesel
Wow,
fuel
no kidding.
to heat it. And wouldn't that be something to brag about? That's thinking big and a long-term goal. But once we start cranking out 50-gallon batches, it shouldn't be too hard to do. And
Okay.
we had made before, it's pretty stable, so I don't think it's going to go bad.
No, it'll be all right.
At
I got
all.
two questions. Because I did one on a Jetta with the students. We added a tank, so we had you'd start it on diesel,
Switch it over.
once it warmed up, because then you don't have to have electric heaters. You use the diesel to heat it. Yeah, heat exchanger and all that stuff. Yeah, the radiator fluid wrapped around the filter, and it's actually pretty clever. It runs a hotline back to the tank, wraps around the tank, and then on the way out takes the fuel with it. The fuel is a line inside the cold line coming back out, which is still kind of warm. So your fuel is encased in warm coolant the whole way back. So you're good. You're not going to coagulate and freeze up. Now, something that I noticed, and I want to know if you experience the same thing. When you start up a diesel that runs on veggie, doesn't it smell better?
Yeah. Yeah, we need to put it in some and roll some coal with vegetable oil and see what that.
I used to make bio for my truck, and I used to do that. Our roadway would go by the football players, and I had Chinese food bio in there at the time, and they'd be like, "Hey!" be running after me.
That's funny, yeah, and also if you start up a diesel inside, which is a terrible idea, but if you do, it gets you in the nose, it's like pungent, right? But the biodiesel, yeah, of course you don't want to breathe that stuff either, but it's not as harsh. And then I wonder if it feels less harsh, but maybe it's just as bad, or is it actually less emissions than the diesel partner to that? I don't even know.
Well, that's where we need Mrs. Harpin. That was my chemical engineer from Procter & Gamble when she decided that she wanted to teach. She will know the chemical makeup of everything and what it's doing. And I never would have thought we should have invited her. She'd have probably been glad to do this. So
I mean, I noticed with my own, when I was making it for my truck, if I didn't clean enough of the meth out, I would definitely have a stringent smell to my nose, and I would lose a little bit of power to the tank.
Okay.
So it was noticeable if you didn't get your ratios right.
Okay. So in my case, we never modified the fuel. We just modified the car. So we had we filtered it, and then we had another filter at the front that was heated, and then another diesel filter, the stock filter. And what I noticed was the power was good. In fact, it felt like the torquey bottom end was better, and then the high end wasn't there for some reason. But that's just me feeling the car. It drove great. It was a diesel Jetta 5-speed. That thing was awesome car.
That's something that I want to do. I've always wanted to do one of those grease cars, and
it's great.
And take the time and put it in there, and just really just do it. But it's just
a lot of
time
labor
and dedication.
That's the thing, is that it's funny because right when I got started doing that, people started noticing, not me, but the industry noticed And what they did was the health department conveniently started requiring that restaurants have a registered recycler, and they put a lock on their. Yep, they put a lock on the veggie.
Up here they were. The recyclers were actually paying the restaurants for the oil.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's why I got out of it. I wasn't going to start paying for used oil.
So, Gary, where do you get your oil? Because it's not as easy as it was.
Well, which we haven't done a bunch yet. There's a local bar that we got a bunch from when we were doing it last year, and it was funny. We tested their oil, and Andrea did. I don't know what all she tested. She says, "This is really good oil. They must change our oil regularly," and it's a kind of a dive bar. I would have thought the opposite. So I'm ready to test some of the other oil I got to see how those restaurants stack up. My Knights of Columbus chapter, we do pork tenderloin fries and fish fries during Lent, and I got all the oil from that last time. So I got about 50 gallons worth.
Oh, that's a lot. There you go.
There's a local restaurant too I eat breakfast at, and go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just watch that you don't have hydrogenated oil, because even after making it into bio, it still congeals at a lower temperature.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mine's going to be within our shop, and really, I mean, eventually our Jeep will go down the road, or one of our newer trucks, but we don't get out on the road much. So, but you spoke of buying the companies that buy the waste vegetable oil. The lady at the local restaurant said, just come get it. They only pay me about $15 a month, and they don't always pay very well. So they're not getting hardly anything out of it anyway. They don't really mind.
Yeah. And they got to do it putting it into the tank, because the tank is locked.
Yeah. Technically their property then.
Yeah. So this is what the kit looks like. So
what about the cafeteria at school?
Probably do that too. Oh,
you shouldn't be frying food at school anymore.
Exactly.
True, I guess
they banned it.
They got rid of our fryers.
They banned it. Like the same year that I decided to do the project, they banned it. 2010.
That's right. Aren't the fries now supposed to be like baked?
They're baked.
I think
they're baked.
Everything's baked.
Yeah, they stink.
Yeah, dude, come on. Fried food's never gonna die.
I forgot about that. I forgot about the getting rid of all the unhealthy food at school.
Meanwhile, it's a French fry. It's a French fry. It's already pre-fried. They just bake it. It's crazy. Anyway, this is what the kit looks like. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
So you get like a tank that is TIG welded. It's aluminum tank. It goes where the spare tire was, so you don't have to do anything to the car, which is nice. Then you get hose, you get fuel line hose, and then you get these solenoid pumps, and then that brings it all up to the front of the car, where it's hard to see, but this is a diesel fuel filter, but it has a copper coil going around it. You see? And the copper coil has the hot coolant, which then, keeps the diesel filter moving. Then all this other stuff of brackets, and there's a computer, and then you got a little thing on your dash that says what temperature you're at and all that stuff. Oh, and here's a filter they give you.
So what's that cost?
This one's $1,700.
Ouch.
It's but this thing's like dialed in, this thing's dialed in, that's why it's good. They make it in the US. They make it. But what's weird is that when you click on trucks, he used to have a whole thing with F-150s and Dodge and this. Nothing. He's got nothing here. Maybe he's going out of business. I don't know. This has been a long time going. I wonder if he's cutting back a little. I don't know. I haven't looked at this website in a while. But yeah, they used to do, full-size trucks. Anyway. So that's Grease Car. I think they're up in Vermont or New Hampshire or something like that.
That tank is smaller than I thought.
Well, that's for the car.
Yeah, that's for the
But
car.
The truck tank is going to be bigger. Yeah, but I click on this. There's nothing here.
My buddy has an F-350 crew cab, and he has a cap on it, and he has a almost like a truck box in the back at the front of his bed that he made the tank. So
there
he
you
filters
go.
it, pours it in there, and then goes from there.
Mm-hmm.
So do you get better fuel mileage on biofuel, or is it all the same?
It seemed the same to me. It seemed the same to me, but I don't know. I couldn't calculate it. It drives great. That's the only thing I can tell you.
I mean, I noticed it was similar, if not 1 or 2 less on my vehicle, but
it's a little less. There's a figure for the BTUs. Like I say, I'm not the chemical expert, but
it's lower BTUs definitely.
Yeah.
And this is your like computer that tells you like, oh, the fuel's up to temperature. You can now operate your solenoid, and you just hang it on the dash somewhere, you know.
But the idea of getting free oil and making your fuel and spending the $4 a gallon on the methanol and then the lye, you were saving a lot. So that's where it was intriguing for myself, at least.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to this guy Jim. He's not. I guess he's going to miss out. But that's okay. We'll get him in for another show. But what I was going to cover, just to transition a little, what I was going to cover was swing it back over to a little bit over to Hodge's project here. Hodge, where are you at with this project now? You're doing your research and you called Dana. What happened with that?
Yeah, I wanted to. Can you guys hear me? I think my network is a little sketchy now.
I can hear you.
Okay. I wanted to follow up on this question of talent. And you're saying we don't have enough people, young kids, interested in diesel. And what do you think is needed? Or why are people not interested? Why can't we recruit them?
Oh, that's simple. They're trying to shove everybody into college.
Well, and I mean, it's not just it's across the trades. It's across the hands-on industry. Like, I don't know. I mean, some people say because people are kids are lazy, which, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if kids are any lazier than we ever were or wasn't, but yeah, getting pushed into college, but a lot of the problem is now is like this younger generation, they want to make $20 an hour right out the bat without have to work very hard for it. Does that make sense? Like that's what things I just had a discussion with a kid the other day about wanting a job and wanting to make money. And I said, is that your only motivation?
Right.
Money? He goes, well, yeah, every job's motivated by money. I said, well, I'll give you that. But if you're not motivated, if you don't have the desire to do a good job, no matter what you get paid, why would I reference you to anybody, whether they're going to pay you $10 or $20 an hour, right? Like they just want,
100%.
so it's, I don't know. I hate ripping on the younger generation like that. Cause I mean, every generation rips on the younger generation, no matter what, but like the fact that they watch YouTubers all day that make, $100,000, $1 million a year, and all they do is mess around on, which they put a lot of work into it. Don't get me wrong. There's actually a lot, but they think it's, I'll just make some videos and do whatever. And people pay me lots of money and they don't have to do anything. Like, I don't know. It's just the feel I get. Like it's the grit isn't around anymore.
So I grew up in Germany and I only moved to the States 2 years ago. And so I'm not fully aware of what trades and vocational training and how the system works. But I'm curious if this is just a generational shift and an educational shift, or if it's also partly a technological shift, and if the new generation of how we power everything from everything electric based to heating and cooling to mobility is going to change, not in 20 years, but in 2 to 5 years. And if we're ready to have the workforce, if those are all jobs that need college degrees, or if electrical engineering or electrical mechanics or mechatronics or whatever there is needed can also go through trade school.
I think it'd go through trade school. I think if the more, once it becomes popular or cool and they see what it is, I think that's the thing. Once you get the kids into it and they see how cool things are, like for me, we build houses, but whether it's robotics, mechanicals, building houses, whatever, I think that's the thing. You gotta show them the cool stuff. They all want, we remember what it's like to be in high school. You want to do what's cool, right? Like fun and cool. And for us as shop teachers on this group, we try to do that. As it's hard to do fun things, right? And then we got Chris Davis. He gets into like snowboard building, paddleboard building. So Barbercheck built a sauna with students. So I think it's one of those things where, as the schools and teachers, you got to find a way to make it cool. Like like Gary running the whole shop off of a bars leftover vegetable oil. That's pretty cool. So I think that's part of it too. I think sparking the interest more could also spark the industry supply a little bit better. That's my thought, I guess.
You just got to get the kids into the classes. Like I had a meeting about scheduling last week, and I'm like, look, I got these kids for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. What can I do in 2 weeks? And I said, there's upper administration telling me, well, you need to have the kids more time. You're an administrator. You're telling me you need them for more time. There's school board members, telling me we need them for more time. But then on the administration ends of, the school board thinks it's just a regular traditional wood shop still. And I'm thinking, all right, I've never seen a board member in my room. I've never seen a central administrator in my room. All right? Tell them to come in, jump onto social media. I post things all the time. And then even if it's still your traditional wood shop, it's what the kids need right now. They're looking for people to turn wrenches and carry hammers right now. That's what our nation needs. So what if it is traditional wood shop? That's even better.
So like, I don't know I guess you, Hodge, growing up in Germany, it's actually a pretty good perspective to talk about because, from our side, it looks like Germany, has, like they're always into the trades and whatnot. And over here, I think there was a bit of an overcorrection because so I'm a kid from the 90s. So I graduated school in 95. When I went, I brought home a car from the junkyard. My parents looked at me like they saw a ghost. They were like, "What is that? Why is that in our driveway? Are
Panic attack.
Crazy?" You know what I mean? Like just madness. The idea that I would use my hands to do so. But then when I sold it for more than I paid for it, my dad was like, "Wait, what? Really?" And I was like, yeah, I sold it for like almost 3 times what I paid for it. And they were like, oh, that's interesting. And then that opened a door, because so there's an overcorrection going on with the college situation. And I understand because, they don't want their kids suffering in a factory, but that hasn't happened in a really long time. And if you worked at a factory or you are a electrician, you could own the factory one day. You could own your own electric company, and then you're going to make more money than your buddy who went to college, who's got $150,000 in debt.
You're going to employ the people with college degrees.
Yeah, exactly. Gary, you had your hand up. Go ahead. Okay.
Unmute.
Yeah, he's muted.
I was trying to get some pictures up, but back to Hodge there. How does Germany work? I was looking at doing a teacher exchange, and I had to provide housing for the teacher that came over here, and I was in the middle of building a house 2 summers ago, and I wouldn't have had anywhere good for them to stay. But I understand, everybody chooses your career path much sooner there, and it's very focused. And I've heard that the teacher teaches the content, and you get it, and the teacher moves on. There's no. It seems like we coddle kids here a little more than being really focused. And there's a lot of industry support with all your companies backing your career trades with apprenticeship programs. Am I wrong or bad rumors?
No, some of it actually works very well. Some of it is totally outdated. So my sister's a teacher, but for elementary school, my mom was a teacher. Have a little bit of experience teaching English as a foreign language, but not really in the German school system. So I don't exactly know all the details. I love the idea of more exchange programs to, share these experiences on the professional level. What I do know is that there is, my generation was this internship generation. I also graduated in the late 90s, and people had unpaid internships forever because without experience, you don't get a job. Without a job, you don't get any experience. So that's when they kind of started applying minimum wage kind of rules for internships even. But there's another challenge, and I think that comes from industry. I mean, you all know what all the VW money is doing here now. And if the notion is that we need to hang on to the old business models and we invest all of the entire brain mass that we have available in tweaking software to fake emissions, as opposed to using this brain mass to innovate, then then of course we're going to lose to Tesla. Okay, now finally VW has a car out that doesn't suck, but it's not much better than that. And Elon Musk is probably 4 years ahead in electric driving, and probably 7 years ahead in driverless cars. And so hence my question about what kind of talent do we need in the future? Because it's beautiful to look at the shift from diesel to biodiesel or to other biofuels. But when you talk about what is the starter motor versus the electric drivetrain, that's all you have. You have a motor, you have a battery, you have a controller. That's it. So I strongly believe that, in terms of fuel costs, is already half. In terms of maintenance, is 30%. And then we're going to have to deal with the emissions. So my kids are going to need a special permit to borrow an ICE car from the museum.
What? I hope not, because I want to rip around on an old 57 Chevy or something.
Yeah, and you're gonna pay taxes for that.
No, I know.
I think, this is not a question of 5 or 10 or 15 years, and so what I'm really curious about is whom do we need in that workforce in 10 or 20 years to not lose to China and India, and what is in your guys' power? You are at the forefront of instilling this interest and curiosity so that the kids can come home and convert cars and convince their parents that that was a good idea and that they're not a lost cause because they get their hands dirty. And I think you as shop teachers have an immense power to spark the curiosity. Ken Robinson, we are all born with this insatiable curiosity, and then we go into school. So and that's maybe in some areas, to back to your question, Gary, slightly better in Germany because it's less focused, but in others it's not. So I think project-based learning and these alternative programs that just let people slit their hands.
Well, for me,
there's band-aids.
There are no requirements. I mean, they say there are to come to my class. They don't hold anybody to any standards. So I have such a wide variety of skills. I have some really good kids. Then I'll have some that that have no background or reading ability. I've had reading ability down to second grade level, but I'm supposed to get them to pass an industry credential that's written at a college level. It just doesn't compute. I mean, everybody deserves a chance. I get that, but I am almost embarrassed sometimes when a employer calls me wanting help and I have nothing to offer. My kids that want jobs and have driver's license, that's another big issue that I have trouble overcoming, and we've tried things for that. I just don't feel I'm doing my job and providing for the workforce.
Another thing I found challenging for getting kids to go after jobs the kids are interested are going to go into that field, carpentry or whatever, mechanics. But like right now, you can go to Walmart, get a $15 an hour job, and it's not glamorous, but it isn't hard. And you could go.
All right, I'm back.
You could go
Jim's
work
gonna
for.
Join in. Sorry, Matt. Keep going.
You're fine. You could go work for a carpenter, starting off just being a laborer, make $10, $12 an hour, but you're gonna work your butt off. So, and that's the other thing.
Before Jim jumps on, I wanted to jump in. Oh, sorry, Matt. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. I just want to jump in and answer a little bit of Hodge's question. Kind of what kind of training is needed for the new generation. I think that's the general idea. What are we going to do about this gap? What I find is that, of course, if you train somebody to do, how to fix 8-track players, then their whole skill set is obsolete by the time they get to the, to the world. So what I would say is, like, for instance, Gary is messing around with biodiesel. But if you think about it, what he's looking for is a measurable increase using the mechanics they have in the shop. So he was saying before you got on, he's going to do a generator and then measure the output and do some comparisons. And that's basically what Tesla is. You see, Elon Musk bought a company called Tesla, right? And then he took it from an experiment where they had this company called AC Propulsions, literally just just an AC motor hooked up to the controller. It was one car. It was a prototype. And he said, okay, we're going to make a production line. And that's when half the people said, okay, you can have the company. They bought it basically, but they didn't have a production line. They had an experiment. And so what Gary's running in his shop is a measurable experiment. Now whether or not that's the future is whether or not a future bet biodiesel is the future or not, the fact that they're running measurable experiments, and the same thing goes for Matt's house. They're doing the blower door, which is like they're testing to see. Okay, Hodge knows. They're testing to see whether or not, can they make a measurable increase or to the efficiency of the house. So you have the craftsmanship connected with measurable benefits to efficiency. Even if you were making an 8-track player, if you made a better 8-track player, the kid would be, I think that's the spark. And then later in the industry, they'll apply the current techniques and this and that. But I think that to answer your question, that's my take on it. And I see all the teachers in the room doing stuff like that. How do you make a better mousetrap, no matter what mousetrap you're making? And that's basically that's the skills you need to jump into the future.
I like that analogy, throwing sparks. I'm throwing sparks trying to create a fire somewhere and providing those opportunities. I don't, you can't teach passion or drive or determination and work ethic. That's taught at home.
Are you guys classes full? Are you at capacity?
Mine are, yes.
I'm trying to thin mine out.
That's a good sign.
No, at my school we're not. I mean, my classroom is idle 2 periods, so that's 40 kids. The other classroom is idle 1 period, so that's another 20 kids. So that's 60 kids that we have room for. So we're not maxed out. We were maxed out at one point, but it ebb and flows, so right now we're in a low.
Yeah, and then keep in mind, like when I was a kid, they did not even have shop. So the school I went to was focused on sending us all to college, like every single one of us. And the first year of my college, I failed out. I was not college material. I mean, I made it through later, but and all I wanted to do was work on cars, and there was no option for that. I didn't even know that shop classes existed until later in my, like, I worked in product design, and then I bounced around, doing various waiter jobs and this and that. And I was like, I hated corporate life. And I just started working on motorcycles and whatnot. And then I was like, wait a minute. A friend of mine was like, hey, there's this thing where you can like build cars, but like you just hang out with teenagers. And I was like, no way. I was like, that's a job. I was like, I'll do that, dude.
One more thought to Gary's question about education in Germany. So when I was a junior, I offered a class to because in Germany, junior and senior high and middle school is all one. We have 4 years of elementary school, and then at fifth, you either go on to what we call gymnasium, which prepares you for college, another 8 or 9 years, or 8. Whatever, or 7 or 8 years, or you go into the general school, which then you can go back into a college track or not. So from 5th to 13th, so in some states they changed it to 12 years now. And when I was a junior, I offered her a tiny shop class for like 5th and 6th graders to build small model airplanes. So it was relatively easy for us to approach the principal, because a lot here, what I'm learning from my partner being on the school board, is that the school board has immense power. In Germany.
Oh, did he freeze? I think he's frozen.
Yeah, he
right,
frozen too.
Okay, we'll wait for him to unfreeze. In the meantime, I understand where he's going with that. Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry.
He froze.
How much did you hear?
I think you were talking about the options.
When you're talking about the power of the school board.
Oh, okay, good. So it was relatively. I think we have more power with the principal and the local administration. So it's easy for me to approach them and say, "Hey, we have 7 or 9 kids who want to build model airplanes with us. Can we get a room?" And they gave us like a Thursday afternoon.
In the U.S. versus Germany, is that what you mean?
Yeah, Gary was asking about school and education and what is possible. And I'm looking, one is like, what are we teaching? But I agree with you, Ron, totally. It doesn't matter if we teach 8-track or mousetraps, as long as people experiment and have, a thesis and prove it right or wrong, and right. Think in solving problems. And application. And that's what gets, application. And where we don't know exactly what the answer is, but we know we want to get to one.
Yeah, and the problem right now is that most of the classes, not the shop classes, but most of the classes are, hey, I have an answer in my head. I'm going to have you memorize it, and then I want you to tell me the answer back.
Right.
And I'm like, I always hated that as a student. Let me hit pause on that for a second and just introduce Jim to the group.
We have Google for that.
Jim Park is a reporter on the trucking industry. And, Jim, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Sorry I was a bit late joining you, and I had a plumbing here I had to deal with, but that's behind me now. But great to hear this conversation going on. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, I'll catch you up. I'm going to catch you up a little bit and catch up the group a little. So just to catch you up, Jim, basically Hodge is interested in converting a full-size school bus to run electric, so he could do like one of those RV things and go around the country having fun, but being sustainable and kind of this and that. But that got me thinking about the trucking industry, about what solutions do they have, and then that led me down the path of looking for something he can buy, which is, he still can make it, but it's very difficult to do that. So I found that Dana Axles had acquired this company called TM4 and this other called Spicer and a couple other electric motor companies. And now, because they already have 100 years experience, they are now combining that 100 years experience and the OEM contracts with their electric motor company. And so now they're selling a combination. And then when I was doing this, I found your video.
Okay.
Jim is YouTube famous, in the trucking industry.
I'm gonna go that far, but yeah, videos there.
So that's why I contacted you. And then also, let me introduce you to Gary Bronson. It says Luke Bronson, but it's Gary. And
Okay.
Gary is a heavy trucking industry teacher in Ohio. And we were just talking about the skills gap.
Excellent. Well, yeah, there's a huge skills gap in trucking. Truck fleets are begging, borrowing, stealing technicians from wherever they can get them. We are absolutely desperate for young talent, old talent. We'll take anybody who can swing a wrench. And to the electric side, we're in the midst of a massive transition now from diesel power to electric. It's going to take a long time, but it's well underway now. People were a bit dubious 5 years ago whether it would go anywhere because of range and weight concerns, blah, blah, blah. You get that. But now we're seeing trucks actually being delivered to customers now, a few of them. But it's in Dana, by the way. They've been supplying powertrain and axle components to trucking for, like you say, about 100 years. They're in all the major truck manufacturers and a lot of smaller ones. And I guess it was about 5 years ago they acquired that TM4 company, which happens to be based in Quebec, which is where I was born and raised. And these motors, the Sumo motors that they're using, they're going all over the world. Got a huge business over in China. And I would say Dana right now is probably the market leader in supplying electric components to trucking. Meritor, another axle powertrain brake provider, they're in the electric game now as well, but they don't seem to be doing quite as well as Dana is. Yeah,
this is the Sumo motor right there.
Yep, that's it.
Cool. Now, so the exciting part for me is that I was just trying to help out. Hodge, trying to find a solution. Because I've done a few electric from gas to electric conversions before, and the biggest trouble is the brackets or a solution that fits and this and that. But so I stumbled across Dana and I said, that's really interesting. You got this company that already has all the contracts with all the major OEMs, and now they're going to provide the electric solution. So I thought, wow, what's the stock doing? And then wouldn't you know, over the last over the last year, they are up 200%.
No kidding.
Yes. Take a look. If you look at a year, look at this. Yep. And so there you go. And about 198%. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Now, but here's the other crazy part. Their market cap is around 4 billion, right? But their revenue is way up. Where's their revenue? Hold on. There we go. Annual revenue. Their revenue is 7 billion last year. The year before that, 8.5 billion. The year before that, 8.25 or a little bit. Before that, they're always around 5, 6. So they're making double what they're worth. So I'm like, okay, this might be an undervalued stock. And then I did some more digging and I looked into the CEO, and the CEO is talking about how, listen, the future is going to involve electric vehicles. So he started buying up all these companies. That was his idea. And so now I'm like, wow, this is really interesting,
Well, what's interesting about Dana, historically, they've made, they make a lot of things for trucking, but mostly axles, drive shafts, some transmission parts. They've never made an engine. And now, of course, with the electric motors and the electric powertrain, Dana now has the entire powertrain of a truck, including all the electric controllers, the power, what do they call it? All the electronics that control what's going on with
the motor controller.
The inverter.
Now that the inverters too, a lot of them are outsourced or supplied from companies like TM4, but they've got the whole thing now: the motor, the axles, suspension parts, drive shafts in some cases. So they're now a powertrain supplier as opposed to a tier one component supplier, which really elevates them in the class 8, well, class 5, 6, 7, and 8 markets. So they're really going places, I think.
That's amazing. And
I just sent the.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I just sent the link to the Sumo that in the conversation with them today is one of them. They have three. There's one single phase and dual and triphase Sumo, and I'm probably going to go with six, 3, 6, and 9. So with the 6 phase. I just sent a link to that particular product.
Okay, I got it
in the chat.
Yep. This is the one you're going to get?
Yeah, probably. Oh, and I just logged in with my phone because of my internet.
That's okay.
So at least we have audio.
Yeah.
No Are you able to buy one of these motors from Dana, like off the shelf?
I need to negotiate with them, but I'm currently looking. So my idea is not to have a full 40-foot bus, but like either 31 or 34 rear engine. And yeah, I'm going to buy probably that motor if I don't find anything better.
Now, Hodge, I got to give you some credit because you're not an OEM and you're somehow buying a single motor from them.
That is weird.
Right. I know. You understand? Hodge has got something. He is on fire. This guy's excited about his project. So I don't know what the conversation was like, but you somehow convinced Dana to send you a motor. That's awesome, dude. Credit to you for doing that.
Because of the story. If this is, I mean, other people have converted electric cars. People have converted electric buses. But a fully solar powered bus as an RV that does educational energy transition stuff. I don't think anybody has done that.
It's a really neat idea.
1 second. Okay.
Like that program Magic School Bus. It used to be on afternoon TV for kids. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Now, Hodge, do you have like a landing page of the story of this?
Not yet. I got the domain solarb.us, but
believe it or not, honestly, Instagram, that's where I would start. Yeah, that's where I would start. We'll follow you. Let us know. We'll send it out. We have an email list of the shop teachers and whatnot. Gary, did you have your
Instagram yesterday, actually? So
Gary, I'm sorry. I just saw it now. You have your hand up for get in here. You don't have to do that. You could just tell us to shut up and start talking. It's all good. Oh, you're muted now.
I'm sorry, I clicked that accidentally. I didn't mean to. I was.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Trying to get some pictures to come up, but anyway,
I want to bring it back to the industry skills gap for just a second because, all right, look, I'm a shop teacher. I hear about the skill gap. I do have actually. That's true. There was a metal supplier that can't find somebody. It's not about the money. It's just they can't find somebody who wants to do it, and then, I mean, clearly you could up the price of the thing, but then you outprice the job. Like, it's just not possible to run the business with, you're going to pay $100,000 for somebody to start out, So then, there was a canning company by me that they go around to all the microbrews and they do the cans. So the microbrew doesn't have to do their own canning. Can't find anybody calling me. They always call the shop teachers because the shop teachers know where the talent pool is. Now, that's the only experience I have with that, but I haven't had any diesel companies calling me about mechanics. But Gary, you must know way more than me. So can you just confirm, like, you can't fill all the positions. Am I right?
No, not at all. What happens with my best is John Deere ends up snagging most of my better students because they will hire under 18, where Cat will not hire under 18, and Cat misses the boat. At least this local cat dealer won't, the Ohio Cat. I heard down in Texas now there's a cat dealer that's actually hiring so many they bust kids to the job. So they're buying kids toolboxes, all kinds of incentives, paying for college if they stay for 2 years afterwards. Just the opportunities are endless. Rush International dealers are doing tons of things. Cummins has an intern program. Cummins is probably the best one out there that I've heard about, where the training you get there, you actually are on the clock getting paid while you're doing the training also. And then it's a union job with phenomenal benefits and things also, where some of the others, you're not paid while you're in class, but you end up getting paid back for your classes if you stay 2 years. Now, I had one student that was actually his homeschool was trying to talk him out of coming to my school, but he was hard-headed enough that he wanted to come to diesel mechanics class and learn John Deere, or his ultimate goal was to work for John Deere. Well, he was in all college credit plus classes and that kind of thing, and he paid for his schooling with John Deere with scholarships and grants, and then when they paid him back, he actually put the money in his pocket. So essentially he got paid to go to college. And that's a story I brag about that's out there, that the companies can't find people to take advantage of this. My son at 10 years old said he wanted to work for Cat. Now his choice, it's going to be his choice what he does eventually. But even at his age, he recognized that that's a heck of an opportunity.
We're close to Cat headquarter, and they just started doing paid internships for high school kids. Because I got a couple kids that might not be taking building trades that may go up to Decatur and do
for heavy equipment.
Yeah, they build graders and stuff. So I mean, it's got to be a heavy equipment. Yeah. I mean, they're building the big old earth movers and graders and all that stuff. So
and the classes they offer, it's not just going to a general class at a Lincoln Tech or a school like that where you are working on all kinds of things. That is very focused. You go and you study electrical for 8 weeks. You go back to the dealer and work on electrical for 8 weeks with a mentor. And they have a check sheet. They check you off on this, that, and everything. And you go back to school for 8 weeks and you study engines or whatever the rotation is. And you are you're not with somebody that's mom and dad's paying for their school and they're up there to party. You are held accountable. That boy I was talking about earlier, he said that was the best 2 years of his life. He learned so much. And then I was glad to hear that they went over some of the same things that he learned when he was in my class. So that kind of validated me, because it feels like I'm doing a shot in the dark sometimes with what I'm covering and what's needed. Worldwide Equipment, the big Volvo Mac dealership in West Virginia and Ohio, and I'm not sure how far they go, Kentucky. They do hire a lot of my students too over the years. And
hey, Gary, I'm going to run the video in the background. They can get a sense of your shop a little bit.
So let me ask you this though, Gary. Do they do anything with the commercial driver's license, like the CDL training or anything? Or is it just the mechanic side of everything?
Just the mechanics. Just getting a license period is a problem for some kids. They have no financial help at home. It used to be when I went to school that driver's ed was in high school, and they've taken it out of the high schools, and now they're pretty much on their own. And at $500 for the course from an outside vendor, a lot of people can't afford it. We've had scholarships and things like that where we had some grant money and paid for their schooling that way for their driver's ed. A lot of them have to wait until they're 18. Most of the seniors that I have left aren't employed because they don't have a driver's license. And then I'm rural, so transportation is an issue. Our Cincinnati campus, it isn't that big of a deal because they could ride a bus to work or something like that. But also the dealers need you to maneuver equipment around the lot too. And if you're not licensed, their insurance won't cover it. So
yeah, because I was curious.
They do CDL training for Class Bs. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious if that was something that you also, instructed on, or if that was something that was included in your program, because that would be great to get, say a kid walked out of your program and they can say, hey, I got this mechanic training, this training, and by the way, I have a CDL.
Oh yeah, that's would put them light years ahead of, I'd put them in the top 10% of applicants, I would think, because not everybody has a CDL. But there are so many hurdles that are outside of our control not to. We have tried things like we did a Cars for My Career program where we're matching kids with cars that were donated, which also in turn, although it's not, a heavy truck, like right there's a picture of a car on the screen now that we donated to a student 2 years ago now. And then when she was done, she thought she had to give it back, and she gave it back. And now we've got it again. It's at the local dealership getting some recalls done, and we'll donate it to another kid. But our biggest hurdle there is finding a kid. We've got more cars to give away than we have kids eligible or can pass a drug test, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I hope it didn't sound like a bunch of excuses, but we're trying.
Are you guys there?
Yeah, we're all here. The employers are rolling out the red carpet, and I just can't get kids sometimes to take advantage of the opportunities. I had a kid that I thought would be interested in Cummins, rock star kid. He's actually graduating as a junior, and he's also graduating from college as a junior with an associate's degree because he's done all college classes. And I was like, go up and just do the interview, if nothing else, just to hear what they have. And he decided not to. If nothing else, for interview practice, to see what is out there. Because my friend that works at Cummins, he said they're really on top of anything emerging, hydrogen fuel and cutting edge stuff. And, they said he could get into a diagnostics type computer position if that's what he wanted.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that's a skill right there. The interview skill, that's a big deal. Just yesterday, one of the kids was asking me about, they're like, hey, Mr. Bloomquist, I was told you're the guy that knows how to get jobs. I was like, well, yeah, I know people are looking for help. Like, what are you wanting to do? He's like, like a construction job. He's like, how do you get them? I'm like, well, I go, I get phone calls occasionally, people looking. I said, otherwise, just Google. It used to be looking at a phone book, but Google all the local carpenters and construction jobs or whatever, and just start asking them if they're looking to hire. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm like, dude, then you don't want a job. Like they're afraid to call and talk. Like one of the things I may do with the kids next year is make them do the material orders. Cause like one of my kids would always ask me if they're doing projects at home by themselves. They'd be like, hey, what am I supposed to order? And I'd help them with the order or stuff. And they're like, can you call that in for me and get that? I'm like, no, man, like it's yours. Just make a phone call. Like now, if they could text those people, all day long. No, that's not right. If they could Snapchat those people all day long, but they're afraid to make the phone call. Like it's just like, guys, those skills are lacking big time because we do. Because when shop class stuff went out, then consumer ed kind of shop or classes, all those kinds of classes went out. Those business style classes. Now we have some here, but that's a small percentage of kids that take it. Like, and I think in freshman seminar, maybe they learn how to do like a resume or something maybe now, but like just the phone call conversation to make order for materials was like something you go to Mars to do. Like it was unheard of.
Well, whenever we do applied learning projects is what we call them. When a customer comes in from outside, we can't charge anything. I will extort pizza out of them or something in the end. But I have the students make all the calls with the customer and tell them, all right, here's what we found. Here's what we're going to need and that kind of thing. And then also with our Jeep project and our cab over project, I tried to run, I'm doing my best to run the whole thing as a actual shop. I'm really trying to get a clock in feature on a work order system where they clock in and off of jobs. I bought a system last year right before COVID hit, and then it all fell to pieces, collapsed around me. But for our Jeep and our cab over, I made them apply. So I had a lead engine mechanic, lead drivetrain, lead electrical, and they all had to apply for the Jeep. And then when it came to cab over, it was optional. And then the administrators interviewed all of them and chose who got the role. So there was no favoritism on my part. Nobody could accuse me of it anyway. I could have guessed who was going to get hired, but they really, I was told by the administrators and counselors that did the interviews that they really stepped it up second round and were impressed with. Kids were going in with a whole plan of, here's my plan for the electrical system. Here's what we should do. I even had a purchasing agent that they were supposed to go to with purchasing things they needed. Of course, I oversee it all, but trying to put it all into their court and, make them work out their problems instead of coming to me constantly.
I told the juniors next year they're in charge. The project's theirs. I'm not. They're like, what? I'm like, yep. You guys are running the show. It's all on you. And they even get power over TikTok because I don't know how to. I don't get the TikTok. Instagram's easy. I get it. TikTok, I don't understand it. My 5-year-old or my 6-year-old is going to do the first TikTok video for the Build, Learn, Teach TikTok page, and then the kids, and they're jazzed about it. They're already like, I'm gonna filter it. It's got to be appropriate and it's got to be project specific. They're like, no, we'll come up with good stuff. We promise. I was like, I took that idea for Barber Check, and so dude, they're all geared up about that. But I told them next year, I said, look, guys, you figure this out. You guys are in charge next year. I'm not. This is your project now. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's all yours. What do you want it to mean? It's all yours. Because taking pride in the project is lacking this year. Because they didn't start the project, they came in on the tail end, so their stake in the game isn't as high this year. So
a couple years ago, I did something I put a kid on the spot. I don't remember if it was at my current school or my former district, but we were after school. I think it was after school, and we were just shooting the breeze, and the kid was asking about materials, and I said, "Well, what do you want to do about finding materials, X, Y, and Z?" And he was like, well, I'll call, da, da, da. So while I was sitting there with him, I said, okay, you're going to call? He goes, yeah. I said, as a matter of fact, I got the phone number right here. We're going to call right now. I dialed the number, and while the phone was ringing, I said to the kid, talk to him. We were on speakerphone, and put the kid right on the spot. I said, talk to him, figure it out. He sat there, he made the phone call, he talked to the people, and he did what he wanted. And they didn't have what we wanted, but it gave the kid the guidance and the experience to make that initial call. Like, hey, that wasn't that bad, So sometimes if you just hold their hand for that first phone call, it's better. Then they can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll yes you to death. They'll yes you to death behind the scenes. Yeah, I looked. Yeah, I went. No, they didn't have it. And they'll lie to you. But when you put them on the spot and you put them in a hot seat, that's when they produce. And that's what I found.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is that you got to have at some point, the kids need some sort of ownership. Basically, like going back to what we said, the spark, right? So it's kind of like building a fire, Education's not, this is some sort of quote, education is not the filling of a bucket. You're not trying to get people to memorize shit. That's terrible. What you're trying to do is light the fire. So, from a campfire, you can't light the fire with a piece of wood like a log. You need little twigs that then grow into something, then you feed it something bigger. Then you go something bigger. And at some point, the fire feeds itself. And that's pretty much the situation. But imagine explaining this fire analogy to some sort of school board. They're like, well, we need memorization numbers. It's like, you can memorize whatever you want. It's not going to matter, because that would be like saying, hey, let's get them to read about riding bicycles. Well, you could read every book on riding bicycles. You are not going to be able to ride a bike unless you actually ride a bike. That's just the way life is. So
that's a, to kind of go to piggyback what I was saying before and what Ron was saying. Like, I know when, like, say for example, the kids are building something in class. It could be a box, it could be a catapult, it could be mousetrap car, it could be anything. Sometimes the kids will come up to me and be like, hey, Mr. Z, how do you approach this problem? Or what do you think I should do with this problem? And then I'll sometimes turn around and say, I know what I would do. What do you want to do? You know, and then literally throw it right back into their lap. And then by doing that, it gives them some thought time. Plus, it makes them kind of think like, how would I think Mr. Z would do that? And then, you know, maybe 5 minutes later, or even maybe even a couple seconds later, they'll say, well, you know, I might consider cutting that joint on a table saw, or I might consider making, you know, this cut with this method. And you can say to them, well, that's kind of not what I was thinking, but let's try it your way.
Yeah.
And sometimes I tell them what I was thinking, and sometimes I say, let's do it.
It's nice to have that exchange, you know, that intellectual exchange where you're like, hey, what would you do? You know, that's kind of cool.
And I feel in the mechanic realm, whether you're trying to diagnose, you know, a carburetor or fuel or, you know, electrical issue in a car, you know, you can have that conversation easier than you can in a wood shop, because you can say to the student, well, you looked at, you know, XYZ project or problem in the Jeep, right? What is your diagnosis of that? You know, and you flat out might say, hey, there's a blown fuse, you know, but the other kid's thinking like, or the student or the group of students are thinking like, well, I think there might be a disconnected wire here, or there might be a leak in, you know, this tubing. And you might think to yourself, oh, I didn't check that yet, you know? So either A, you go back and look, or B, you just run with it with the kid. So I feel like in that type of environment, in like the, say, mechanic realm, you can get away with that a lot easier, you know, because you have all that prior knowledge that you're building upon. Because problem solving is what? One of the higher level thinkings. You know, it's not, like you said, memorization where, you know, fuel plus air equals, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Boom.
So, but there is part of, you know, you need to know the 4-stroke process if you're trying to diagnose a, you know, a combustion engine. You know, you got to have that memorized.
Yeah, but you know,
you'll get a kick out of this story if I can jump in.
Yeah, please, Jim, go ahead.
I was working on something last month about lighting problems on trailers, because you know, you get into inspection blitzes at the scale and they have lights out and they get tickets, and it's a real drag. The guy I was talking to was telling me that he had a mechanic who was all set to change out a $1,000 ABS control module because he wasn't getting any power. And he did a bit of basic troubleshooting, decided that the module was no good, and was all set to take it off and put a new one on, when in fact the power plug for the front of the trailer was disconnected. Oh, no electricity, no juice on the trailer at all. And all of his diagnostics were coming up 0.
Yeah.
Go around the front and check and see if it was plugged in or not. So that problem doesn't end at high school, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and you know, and then go ahead.
I was gonna say that happened to my sister. Her AC had went out in her house, and she's like, "Man, I don't know what's going on." I said, "All right, well." She called someone local, and they're like, "Oh, they said something was wrong and needed switched, and it's gonna cost so much." And then my buddy, it's an HVAC guy locally, he's like, "Well, we'll go over there and I'll do it cheaper for her." We get over there, the breaker is flipped. Nobody checked the breaker.
Man, yeah,
that happens to me every summer. My wife turns on the AC. It's the breaker.
Funny. So let me switch gears a little and ask Jim. You know, there's a video of you driving one of these electric trucks, and I was just curious, like, what's it like? Like, you know, what do you think of the situation? Is this an experiment, or is this like a viable thing in the industry? Like, I don't even know what's going on. You know, I think it seems interesting. What's going on from your point of view?
It's totally viable. And in fact, trucks like this one in this video are now out in customer hands doing regular work for customers. The big holdback right now is getting enough electricity into the places that use these trucks so that they can have a fleet of 10 or 15 or 100. They use a lot of electricity, so it's not like you just plug the thing into where you plug in your dryer or your stove. You need a lot of power. Once they get over that hurdle and get the infrastructure built out, these trucks, this one here, I think has depending on the battery pack, but the one that we were driving here, this moment in the video was amazing. I came down this ramp onto the freeway in Atlanta where I was driving it, and just the lightest touch of the pedal. Now, there was no freight in the back, so it wasn't heavy, but the truck just took off. Like, there's so much torque, and it's flat all the way across the curve in an electric motor. So I probably could have laid down some rubber on the road if I got really aggressive with it. Of course, with all the control modules and the controllers they have, they can dial that back a little bit so drivers don't peel the tires off the trucks, which is something they're worried about. But
wow,
this thing here, it's obviously dead quiet, no powertrain noise at all, which interestingly leads to some other issues, because now all of the rattles and squeaks you hear in the cab that are normally blocked by the diesel engine are audible, and they drive the drivers crazy. So the drivers are coming back in all the time. Fix this squeak, fix that squeak. There's something wrong with this, something wrong with that. And it's driving the maintenance people crazy. But of course, those noises were always there. They just never heard them over the diesel. That's another thing they're going to have to work out. But they've got a range of 150 miles, 100, 200, somewhere in that range, 100 to 200 miles. And when you think about it, it doesn't sound like much, but you can drive around the city of Atlanta all day delivering to grocery stores and, convenience stores and what have you, restaurants. You might put 50 miles a day on the truck. And one of the interesting things about this technology is they've got what they call regenerative braking technology, where when the truck is coasting or rolling down a hill, the momentum is pushing the motor, which is actually producing electricity and jamming it back into the battery. So you get this regenerative charging going on. And if the driver is good at how they manage their throttle and brake, and you've got a city with some grades, you start high in the morning and work your way down, you can actually have more energy on board when you come back from a run than when you started. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's possible by generating electricity.
I've heard about this. Is this true? If let's say you go up a hill and you pick up a load when you get there, and you go down the hill, now you have more mass. So you actually will end up with more power at the end of the run.
Yep.
They're doing that with mining vehicles.
Wow, this is great. Oh, maybe Hodge told me about it. Someone told me about this a couple of weeks ago. I was
they can dial in the regenerative factor to where they're producing, say, 100% of the energy from the wheel torque to the motor, which, if you were driving that particular vehicle empty in that configuration, it would be really torquey. You'd lurch forward every time because there's so much that the motor can do to generate electricity. Without the momentum, it would stop the truck. So when you're heavily loaded, they can dial that right up. So it's producing a great deal more energy than when it's empty, and becomes a very uncomfortable ride for the driver. So on a long downhill coast like the mining truck, you can generate electricity, produce energy driving downhill, and actually come out of it with more than you started.
That's wild. That's
really
amazing.
And this picture here, that's the power electronics. That's the term I was looking for. These are the coolers, the power modules, the inverters, all that stuff that it takes to make this work. And this particular truck, if I remember, had an inline motor as opposed to an actual motor. So there was still a drive shaft. The motor was right behind or underneath the cab where the front of the box would be, and it had a conventional drive shaft and differential. Whereas a lot of these trucks now are using two electric motors, one at each wheel end on the back, which That way, it opens up the space between the frame rails for batteries.
Oh.
You don't have to put the batteries outboard of the frame. You can put them in.
Oh, right. Then you don't have no more differential.
No more differential. No more. Well, you still got an axle, a rear axle. It's on a suspension, but the motors are actually either in line with the axle or they're right at where the differential would be. Some of them, there's two different configurations. The motor is mounted right at the input to the differential, so you still get the differential action, or it's just a straight axle with motors at either end, and you get your differential action from the power controller, electronic controllers.
Now, what's cooled on this? Like, what are the motors cooled, or are the batteries cooled? How? Because I saw the radiator in that one video. Like, what is being piped through there?
Mostly. The batteries need to be kept at an operating temperature, an optimum operating temperature. So the cooling system either heats or cools the batteries, and there's some heating and cooling going on with the motors as well, but not to the extent that you have the batteries that need the temperature control.
Now, what about how does dust and road grime affect the motors, especially if they're in a rear, like one on either side of the rear of the vehicle or the truck? Will that affect the operation and the longevity of the motors on the trucks, or not?
I wondered that too, and they keep assuring us that they're all sealed right up, so there's no way you can get contaminants inside the motor.
Well, just like a Tesla, you can actually have a sealed motor, and then the way you cool it is liquid antifreeze. So obviously, it's not going to be the same amount of that 80% heat loss that you get from an ICE engine, but you're still going to have generating heat from friction and bearings and from
the cooling's all liquid, and there's coolant lines that run the length of the truck from the motors to the radiators up in the front. There's water pumps. There's usually two separate loops for the motor and the batteries for temperature differential. But really, I think
was just wondering that, especially with the road conditions, after, you don't get a lot of rain for, maybe a week or 2 weeks, the roads get kind of dusty from, the salt and the stones and the sand and the dirt and just the stuff that drops off of cars. I mean, some of that stuff is real powder, if you will. And then by the time it gathers and sneaks into all the little crevices, you would think that being like an over-the-road truck, that you would have a lot of exposure to that, and then that would eventually would do some type of damage to the motors themselves.
No, they're sealed.
Well, I know that, but what I'm just saying is you have that added abrasive that potentially could harm these things.
Well, that's what they tell us. I mean, these things are all,
but there are no moving parts.
Pretty short life cycle.
One moving part.
We'll look at one that's 10 years old. It's got 10 years worth of experience and, accumulated time and mileage, exposure to all this stuff. We might see something different than what they're telling us now, in the marketing and the testing and validation stuff that we're getting. But the only way to do that is to put them in service. You can do accelerated testing with them, dunk them in salt tanks and dump them in dust and do all kinds of nasty things to them and get a pretty good idea on paper how it's going to fare over a 10-year lifespan. But really, the only way to do that is to prove they can do it. Like
I'm in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, where I live. I work in New Jersey, but the Mack truck, one of the main Mack truck headquarters is over here in Allentown, and they had a full-size wind tunnel where they would put these trucks through like sandstorms and all these different types of environments. So, if those trucks can handle that, that's one thing. Are those electric trucks still going through the same type of rigorous testing?
All the same. I mean, with the truck in that video that I was driving, that chassis is available with a diesel engine. So literally what the OEMs are doing now, with the exception of Tesla, basically, which I'm not I don't have a lot of faith in what they're doing, but OEs like this are basically taking an existing cab and chassis, pulling out the diesel powertrain and dropping an electric powertrain in. So the designs aren't necessarily optimized yet. They're not designing the chassis. They're dropping the powertrain into the chassis. If they were to take a clean sheet approach and say, where do we put the motors? Where do we put the power electronics? Where do we put the batteries? The truck might look quite different. But obviously, retooling and re-engineering an entire truck chassis at this stage of the game is a bit premature. Now, what Tesla's done, and Nikola, the fuel cell electric truck people, the hydrogen guys, their trucks are a little bit more designed from the ground up, so they look a bit different. The powertrains, the suspensions are a little bit different, but neither of those two companies really have the sort of intellectual horsepower to put a truck together from the ground up the way Dana and Peterbilt and Mack and those companies do. So there's lots of chassis companies now in the market, like Workhorse and XOS, I think they call themselves ZOS.
Spartan also.
They're another one. There's that company up in Ohio there, the electric pickup truck company. Can't think of the name now. This happens when you get old.
Workhorse is near me, Lebanon, Ohio.
Now it's not Workhorse. It's an old GM plant that they've named this truck after the plant. Doesn't matter. But they're starting with basically a clean sheet. So if I was a consumer, I'd be a little reluctant to get on board with, the first few generations of a chassis like that doesn't have the experience of a Ford or a GM or a Mack, Kenworth, or Peterbilt. Because those startups just don't know how to build vehicles yet. They'll figure it out, but it's taken the likes of Daimler and Mack and Volvo 50 years to get it right, and they're still making mistakes.
Yeah.
Or they're still learning about what they're doing.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like you have a chassis that has 100 years of experience, or a company that's got 100 years experience. That's why I got excited about hearing about Dana. But let me play devil's advocate on the other side. Full disclosure, I'm a Tesla investor. So
Okay.
let me defend them a little bit. I would say this. I would say you're 100% right.
Lordstown Motors. That's the one I'm thinking of. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. You're 100% right. If Peterbilt or Spartan or any one of these companies and Dana that have the experience, if they adopt the electric drivetrain, they are going to win 100%. They're going to win market share, all that stuff. The thing about the Tesla, the advantage that I think they have is that it's almost like this. My dad had a bakery, right? Like this is what I grew up with, like cookies in the house and baked goods and stuff like that. And if somebody went into the bakery and said, hey, can you guys make me a salad? Because like I'm on a diet. My dad would laugh at them, he would laugh them out of there. And then if he was forced to do it because all his customers started asking for salads, I think my dad would just quit. Like he would quit where he made a salad.
Salad stores down the street. This is a bakery.
Yeah. He used to make this joke about vegetarians, and there was this comedian called Sid Caesar. He knows the bit. Did you ever see that?
Yeah. I'm old too. I know.
Mosquito wings on toast. And I totally get it. I understand 100%. So to get these OEMs that have 100 years experience to do something electric, they might do it, they might not, and so whereas Tesla, they're like the new kids, so they don't have the baggage, so they're going ground up, which could be an advantage, but like you said, it could be a disadvantage because they don't have the experience, they don't have the OEM contracts in place, they don't have the infrastructure, but they're building it very quickly. And I do understand both sides of that. I don't think one's right or the other, but what's interesting about your videos, which I want to point out, is that I think at some point you said that truck you're driving wasn't just a prototype. There's thousands of them on the road, right?
Well, not the electric ones yet.
Oh, okay. I thought they had thousands of those electric ones on the road.
I would call it hundreds at this point.
Okay. All right. So it's early days. It's
Early
early days.
Yeah, it won't be long till we've got thousands, but right now we're just in the especially in the Class 8, the heavier trucks, the tractor trailers. They're not going to be available to buy probably for 2 or 3 more years, unless you're buying into a testing program.
That's why they're talking to Hodge about selling one.
Well, I don't want to say that's the future, because diesel has got at least 20 years left in it. But what we're seeing,
absolutely,
companies like Cummins now are diversifying. They're doing the hydrogen fuel cells. They're doing battery electric. They're still on top of the diesel game. They're still, well, the second largest engine manufacturer in the world. And long after Cummins makes its last diesel engine, those things are still going to be out in the roads for 20 years. So parts, you got support, service, all that stuff. Diesel's not going away in our lifetime.
I 100%. Even though I'm a Tesla fan, I am more a fan of just this whole industry. I love piston engines, gasoline. I love the smell of gasoline. I love all that stuff. Yeah, I'm into it, And to me, the whole thing's interesting. I think right before you got on, I was explaining to Gary that the people that make improvements to the diesel engine, or the people that take diesel engines and then he's doing like a biodiesel one, or they hook it up to hydrogen, this is the same skills that it takes to do an electric truck. Because now, instead of you're dealing with diesel, now you're dealing with an electric motor, but you still have to deal with torque. You still need axles. You still need motor mounts. You still need hydraulics. You got to manage the power, and so I would say it's a very similar skill set. And then as far as the future is electric, the future will have electric. I don't think that it will knock out diesel 100%. What I do think is that it'll take a market share. And what I like about it is it's almost like it's just capitalism. It's competition, So like, instead of one pizza, restaurant in your town, now you got pizza and another type of restaurant. So now you have options. There's if you're locked into diesel, that might not be the best case for you. Especially imagine a fleet vehicle, especially like a garbage truck. It doesn't go very far, but it needs a lot of torque to get going. And so it's got to start, stop all throughout the town. And it always goes back to the same location where they can have a charger. So for that makes sense. But then long distance, flat out 80 miles an hour on a highway, probably go with the diesel, So there's
fuel cells will wind up.
Say again?
That's where the hydrogen fuel cell market is going to open up, is in the long distance, because you could put all the batteries in the world on a highway truck and run it 500 miles, but there's no room for payload. Weight's always an issue. It's 80,000 pounds. That's the limit, right? So you have 30,000 pounds of batteries, 20,000 pounds of truck. There goes all your payload. You've got 20,000 pounds left to put some freight on, which ain't going to work. So
you can't go over 80,000 pounds total?
No, that's the limit.
I didn't know that.
I think it was one of the people at Cummins who said a couple of years ago, it may have changed now, but to have enough battery capacity to run 500 miles, you'd need 16,000 pounds of batteries.
Wow. Interesting.
That's as much as a tractor itself weighs.
You're going to make my dad very happy that you're saying this, because he bought Plug Power. Is a hydrogen fuel cell company, and they're selling a bunch of stuff to Amazon and Walmart and stuff like that. And then Plug, and there's another one. There's a couple of hydrogen suppliers jumping in the game. Hodge, you got your hand up there? Go ahead. Oh,
I think he's muted.
Yeah, you're muted somehow. Okay, your phone is potentially going to work. I don't know. All right, we'll let you get that sorted out. But yeah, I mean, what I like is the options, I like that there's options coming out. Now let me ask you this. With this, let's see. With the now, have you tested more than just the Dana situation?
Yeah, I've driven 5 of them now.
What are the other ones you drove?
It was a Kenworth fuel cell electric. That was the hydrogen fuel cell. I've driven Daimler and International electric trucks, and I've driven a Mack electric refuse truck. Interesting, going into New York City, and the big challenge in New York City is they want to put snow plows on them as well.
Oh, I saw
So
that.
how are you going to get enough battery power to, push snow down the road and collect trash? I think there's another video. If you're there, go to Mac LX. There's there it is, up in the top right-hand corner of the menu there. There you go. And it looks exactly like an LR diesel refuse truck, but it's totally battery electric.
That's awesome. You're like having fun there. This is like a.
I love that stuff, man. I'll drive anything. 4 wheels and a steering wheel. I'm in there. But this kind of stuff, when you get to do it for the first time and then write about it, people always have questions. Well, does it do this? Does it do that? Geez, I wish I thought to ask when I was there. But I mean, what can you really tell in a 15-minute test drive? Not a lot, but certainly it gives you an impression of what's going on.
Now, can you shift any of these? Do any of them have like a manual transmission?
No, it's all automated. Some of them will have a 2 or a 3-speed transmission, and I don't understand fundamentally all the physics of it. But when you get into the debate about motor speed versus torque, there are applications where I may get this wrong. So Hodge, if I screw up, correct me. If you keep a motor turning at a slower speed, like an internal combustion engine, slower is better. But in some cases, faster speeds are better for the motors, more efficient. So you would put a couple of gears in a transmission of sorts behind one of these electric motors just to get it started, and then establish a cruising speed that's sort of optimum. And again, it's all automated, a 2-speed gearbox versus a 10-speed in a truck right now. And really, it's all about optimizing the powertrain and energy, because the electric motor's RPM range will pretty much cover whatever you need to do with the truck. It doesn't matter how fast it goes. It's just a matter of it being more efficient at certain speeds.
Well, so when it comes to this, I get this question a lot. I came up with a good analogy for it, which is, everybody's ridden a 10-speed bicycle. And so the reason you have 10 speeds is because you have a strength problem with your legs, and you have an RPM problem. So if you start out in first gear, it's easy, but then at some point your legs can't go that fast. It's too easy.
Yep.
So then you switch it to a higher gear. But if you switched it too early, now you have a strength problem. You can't turn the thing. So what Tesla did, the reason why they have no changing of a gear, they just have a reduction gear, is that their motor has almost like if your leg had enough strength to be in the highest gear and the RPM to cover. So they go up to 17,000 RPM.
Yep.
And they got all their torque at 0.
Yep.
So there's no changing. There's no gear changing.
Transmission.
Yeah, exactly.
Flat torque band all the way across from 0 RPM to 17,000.
Exactly. And the limiting factor, it's kind of weird. The limiting factor, I think, Hodge, you got to reboot or something. The limiting factor with all the electric vehicles is not the engine size. It's the battery capacity.
Yep.
See? And it's funny. I have a funny way of saying it is that if you look at the back of a Tesla, it says like 70 or 80, and they're talking about the size of the pack, right?
Yep.
But if you look on the back of a gas car, it'll say turbo, or it'll say V8 or V6 or whatever, or or 4-liter or something like that. They're always talking about the engine, whereas Tesla's talking about the battery size. And so your limiting factor is the batteries. The motor, within reason, is not the limiting factor.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just an add-on really there, because I only found this out recently, is the smart thing that Tesla does is that they have different gears in the front and the rear axle. So for acceleration, they have a lower gear in the rear axle. And then when they speed up to highway speed, they put more power onto the front axle. And but that's all electronically controlled. So they technically have two gears, a lower one in the rear and a high one in the front. They just shift the power electronically depending on speed. One thing I think I want to underline what Jim said. It very much depends on the use case. If you're looking at local thing, and Ron, you said that too. There's so many use cases where we have less than 100 miles a day or 150 miles a day, both in like from small things like taxi to delivery to waste management. And then of course we have the overland, and for the overland, battery is not the only option for electric drivetrains. In Europe, there have been numerous experiments with overhead wires, and if you have high voltage DC current, you have very little loss, and then you eliminate most of the battery altogether. And if you look at highway, then you have no weight, 90% or 95% efficiency of the powertrain, and hardly any maintenance cost, very little fuel cost. And then I think the economics are going to decide the whole thing on our behalf.
It'll definitely be economics and, political persuasion, depending on the favored mode. I'm not sure catenary setups like you're talking about would work here, North America, because the distances between cities are so vast. In Europe, they're quite a bit shorter. And certainly if you were to put those sorts of setups between two major centers, I can't
would have
think
to put them between hubs.
Yeah.
And then you lose efficiency in the transition.
I say we do a battery electric with a hydrogen fuel cell and a diesel generator backup. Let's get it all together.
Well, that's called a hybrid powertrain. And the problem with those here in North America is the people who CARB, the emissions regulators, don't like the idea of having an internal combustion engine on board, even though it's probably the most efficient way of doing this. Matter of fact, there's a company called Hyliion. You should be looking at investing in those guys too. They use just that setup as a natural gas powered small internal combustion engine, because natural gas is a great deal cleaner than diesel. It drives a generator which powers a small battery pack, keeps the weight down, and they've got a constant source of electricity because they've got the tank full of natural gas.
And it runs at optimal RPM.
Yeah. A very elegant solution.
Is this it?
HY, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's it.
I have a question. Has anybody ever addressed where all this power is going to come from to charge all these batteries when we're having rolling blackouts, when everybody's running their air conditioners and things?
I'll tell you, Gary, I keep after that, and I keep asking people that, and people keep not answering it.
It's very simple. It's very simple. Solar and wind will beat coal and nuclear any time of day. It's very simple economics.
But go
ahead.
Anywhere now.
We have all the solar we want, but the sun only shines in the daytime, which ironically is when these trucks are running. So how do you?
Yeah, that's why you charge them at night
energy
with local batteries and with wind and with demand side management. It's all doable. There's been numerous studies that show that it can be done and it's economically feasible. I think that's not the biggest challenge.
Now, I shared an article that I found with my students, and I know you don't you can't trust everything online. So my assignment was, what do you think of this article? Is it true? Is it not? Why not? Well, here the article was about a study done by a university in, I believe, Cologne, Germany, that said lithium electric vehicles pollute more than some of the diesels when you take into account mining of lithium and disposal and all of these other things. Maybe it was funded by Volkswagen. I don't know, and it was incorrect.
Do you have that article?
I'll have to dig it up. I do somewhere.
Well, so let me help out the situation for a second, because I'm always like I did an electric car with the students back in 2009. We brought it to car shows, and someone would bring up this same topic. They say, "Well, you're not going to take my diesel, and hey, where are you going to get the energy from?" And what I would say is that, look, we're in a transitional period. I think that people are still going to have the diesel, and thank God they do, because I still want. I mean, listen, I have a Ford Ranger. I'm buying gasoline every week, So I have and I have and then I also have an electric car that was converted by somebody. So, and the charger stopped working. So I'm in, so I got to, so basically, like, it's not going to be like a light switch. Like all of a sudden we're running electric. It's going to be a transition. And in some economic areas, in some areas of the country, it's going to work. In some areas, it's not going to work. And so what I like is, that it's capitalistic society. You could buy a diesel truck if you feel like that is going to work out for your fleet. You could buy a electric truck if you want to roll the dice and say, look, we're going to try this thing. We don't fully understand the maintenance yet. We don't know where we're going to get our power yet from, but we're going to try and do this clean thing. And maybe you get a grant to get started or something like that. So, I think there's a place for all of it, and we are in a transition. So
I have a quick question, and maybe you guys know this. I've been told, because, we got, I know I got a lot of people work for the train companies, and they're diesel powered. I'm told that's still one of the most efficient ways to travel long distance, large cargo, because the amount of, because there's such a small amount of friction between track and rail, that, or the rail and the wheels of the train, that the power to start the train may be great, but once it's going, it's like nothing. So I've heard like those diesel, like using diesel with train is like still one of the most efficient in, like, I don't know if it's the cleanest way or whatever, but like it's still one of the best ways as far as traveling or hauling goods and stuff, because of the efficiency of trains, even though they are diesel.
What they usually go to that argument, you're absolutely right, by the way. It's they measure it in ton mile per gallon efficiency, where you move so many tons of freight per mile per gallon. I mean, the trains just clean up. There's no debate anywhere that they are much more efficient than that many trucks going up and down the road. Where the argument falls apart, and the railroad people conveniently forget, is that trains don't go to grocery stores and gas stations.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not making door stop drop.
No,
you have to.
You got to go to
like petroleum and coal and lumber.
Yeah.
And fortunately, piggyback railroad container trailers, piggybacks. So the biggest customer of the railroads, and they won't tell you this, is the trucking industry.
Yeah.
We put more either marine containers or trailer containers, trailer and chassis on the railroads every day than any other freight that runs. And you want to talk about efficiency? You got a train pulling 500 trailers across the country. Yeah, that is about as efficient as it can get if you've got 2 weeks to get your stuff from California to New York, or the other way. The railroads are not very efficient at moving stuff. They're pretty efficient when you get it on the track. But everybody in shipping now, Amazon, well, you got to have it yesterday or next hour, or pick it up tomorrow morning. So you don't see Amazon trailers on trains. Let's put it that way.
You have to compare point to point.
Well, and like you guys it just made me think of that because you guys
No,
are
it's a
talking
good
about
point.
those over the cable transportation, you know, like Hodge was talking about and stuff. And I was like, well, isn't that become like a train? So that's just my.
No, 100%, Matt. I wanted to point out, that's why I brought this video up. I don't know this video. I just kind of knew that the diesel train, correct me if I'm wrong, is actually electric motors being powered by a diesel engine. And the reason they do that is because the diesel engine, or all engines, they're like a tennis racket. You got to hit them in the sweet spot, like a certain RPM. Yep. A stationary engine is going to be more efficient. And correct me if I'm wrong about that. But then the electric motor has all its torque throughout that curve, the RPM curve. So they put the electric motors down on the hubs, and then they run the diesel engine at almost like a generator.
Yeah, because no clutch could handle that amount of torque.
Yeah. Oh, I see. That probably makes sense too. Yeah.
You don't have the torque at zero, and you wouldn't be able to get the 30,000 horsepower up onto the wheels.
Yeah,
it would blow up.
And then so this is kind of there you go. They're just talking about the changing from direct current. But so there's your hybrid right there, and if you put some batteries in the middle,
Well, that's the principal Hyliion's building, and that's basically a hydrogen fuel cell truck too.
That's cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jim, I have one more question. Have you looked into Tesla Semi? Do you know anything about where they're at?
Yeah, I do. They're notoriously bad for answering questions from the media, probably anybody. Frankly, and I'm not dissing Tesla. I mean, Elon Musk annoys me, but the technology is amazing. But this truck, I don't think will ever see the light of day for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is that there's absolutely no dealer network. And you can't take your Tesla Semi into a Tesla dealership, because what do those guys know about fixing brakes or fixing seats, or when the door falls off, or when the windshield wiper goes? You need a dealer network. And until they have a dealer network, or they come up with a partnership with a company like Rush or somebody like that, that's got nationwide coverage in the end, maybe not right at the beginning, but the trucking industry will never accept a manufacturer that's got no support.
Okay, I understand.
That's a big liability for Tesla. And all the presentations he's made, all the stuff he says about the Semi doing this and the Semi doing that, he never talks about dealerships and support. So obviously he knows it needs to be there, but everybody else is coming out with agreements now with dealers and what have you. So if he's not, then that makes me wonder how serious he really is about this.
Well, I'm hedging my bet. I put a little bit of money on Dana.
Yeah, I'd be a little more. I'd be loading up on Dana rather than Tesla, to tell you the truth.
All right. It's fair. I like the. I don't want people to say, "Hey, oh, you like Tesla, so that's good." Like, I want an opposing point of view. Otherwise, my opinion's worthless without some opposition.
I can't invest in any of this. I can't be investing in them and writing about them, because then I can be seen to be influencing.
Oh yeah,
the stock. So all I can do is watch and observe and ask questions and come to my own conclusions. And Tesla calls himself a disruptor. I tend to call him a distractor.
Okay, that's fair. They are kind of distracting.
Well, they are, because what's interesting, with all the money that's pouring into the tech sector right now, with automated trucks as well as these electric ones, investors are moving away from the brick and mortar companies like Dana and Meritor, and they're putting tons and tons of money into startup companies that have no hope of ever seeing the light of day.
Well,
and they're taking dollars out of the companies that do have a future. The tech press doesn't even know who Dana is, but they're all over,
Tesla
plus AI and Tesla and all these, and it leads people down. There's a few good writers in the tech sector who get it, but an awful lot of, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but young 20-somethings who don't have a clue whether they're assholes or punched or bored when it comes to motor vehicles and, the history. All
How
they
dare you?
think it's a winner. Nuts.
I
Sorry.
love it. No, it's Jim. This is the Shop Class podcast. We are
no kids in the room, right?
Yeah, this is fun, and we're having fun here. I like it. Yeah, listen, you know what? I think one of the most egregious situations was with Nikola. Nikola, what they did was they had Nick. I think it's like this.
Gentlemen, I have to peace out. Jim, thank you so much for your input. That was I really appreciated that. I'm looking forward to continue the conversation on keeping you guys in the loop with what Dana comes back to me with.
Yeah, let me know, Hodge. That sounds great.
Definitely.
All right, talk to you soon.
Enjoy your evening, guys.
Take care.
So one of the things that happened with Nikola was they came out with this truck, and then they put it on a downhill, and they sent it downhill, and it didn't run. And then somebody figured it out and was able to prove it. But meanwhile, you see, this is the strange thing about their stock. NKLA. What happened was, oh yeah, that's way down. Jesus. If you look at what happened was they had this promise going. You see, it's up at like 80. And if you look here, they're worth, this is what the crazy part. Okay, I'm going to shorten it up.
I don't understand that at all.
They're worth more than Dana. This is where I 100% agree with you, Jim. I don't understand why anybody would put their money into this over Dana.
No,
this is irresponsible to me. Now, here's the thing: I can back this up. I can back this up by showing something else. If you look at their revenue, right? I'm not a finance guy. I'm literally a high school teacher. I just been doing some research. If you look at their revenue, okay, that was last year. They made 95,000. Okay, in 2019 they made, I don't even know how they made this, but they made 482,000. Okay, so they're starting to take in a little bit of money, right? But these are not trucks. From my understanding, these are some products or whatever. I don't know what they're selling, but they're not selling trucks. So then there's no trucks on the road. And okay, I shouldn't say that because I'm not authorized to say that. My observation is they don't have any sales and that their valuations are huge. And then you have Dana that has 100 years of sales and profit. And it's like, and they're worth a little bit less. It doesn't make any sense. So this is where I think the bad riff comes from. And think about how many people got burned on this. Look at this downtrend. That's 87% down. That's crazy. So, to me, this is where the riff comes from and whatnot. And then, whereas Tesla, I understand they do make a lot of claims, but the cars back it up. The cars are really good.
Selling cars.
Yeah.
He hasn't turned a profit yet, but there's revenue there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, they're turning profit now. In the last year or two, they've been turning a profit.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're backing it up with the cars. But it's a new company, so they got service issues. I have friends that have Teslas, and the service is terrible. Not that they do solve it, but their customer service, the way they present the car, is not great, and this and that. But I'm with you. I think we're just in a transition, and there's a lot of money going into like stuff like this highly speculative area where, that's why I'm so excited about Dana, because I'm just like, wow, look at all these companies they're working with. And you got this great car, company, and they got the TM4. You've driven it, and it seems to be working.
Yep. One of the things you don't understand the trucking industry that well, probably because you've never dug into it.
Yeah, I wouldn't even pretend to know. That's why you're here.
The overarching concern in trucking, too, are uptime and operating costs.
Okay.
Most companies will tolerate higher operating costs if it reduces downtime. So when you talk about, and this sounds silly, but it's reality, a windshield wiper that'll last 1,000,000 miles, 10 years, without going down and leaving the driver stranded somewhere in a rainstorm.
Right.
They've been building windshield wipers for 50 years. They can make one that lasts 1,000,000 miles. Whether Tesla can buy that same windshield wiper from a supplier, I don't know, maybe. But doors fall off, seats break, the lights on the dashboard burn out, windshields crack, frames crack, springs break. There's all kinds of stuff on a truck that isn't the powertrain.
Right.
That breaks. And trucking companies do not tolerate downtime. So if you've got to go to a Tesla dealer, wherever you can find one, and then they say, well, we can't get to you for 2 weeks because we got a whole bunch of Tesla cars we got to fix. Trucking is going to go, get out of here. Just leave the truck and walk away. So they have absolutely no track record yet in reliable service, distribution, parts, all that kind of stuff. That's what's going to keep the semi out of the market.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. Yeah, it's not like a personal car.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the tech people don't get that. When they introduced the semi, they were talking about 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. Well, fleet managers were ripping their hair out because drivers would do that. And guess what? You'd have no tires next week. And at $800 a tire, you don't want to be feeding your driver's ego by letting them burn rubber all the way down Interstate 80. That's not going to work.
Right. So wrong market.
Boasting about an absolutely ridiculous feature that nobody in trucking wants anything to do with. You're up in the stock value. You're giving these guys in the tech press a big boner because this, wow, look at this truck will do. Nobody in trucking wants that. Believe me.
Interesting. I think,
What about,
go ahead.
What about slip seating where trucks are used more than one shift? How long does it take to recharge?
Well, that's one of the problems facing the electric market. And now is you run it for 8 hours, you take it right down to 20, 30% of its charge. It takes 8 hours to charge it back up. Or if you do a fast charge, it'll get back up in about 4 hours, but it kills the life of the battery. Shortens the life of the battery by a lot. So fast charging is not a really good option. And that's another thing that's keeping, if you drive for Pepsi and you deliver beverages around the city of Philadelphia or New York City, that's great. You're out hustling, swinging your soft drinks from 6 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Bring the truck, plug it in, walk away. It'll be all charged up for you in the morning. But in a highway application, the way a trucking company runs a truck 24 hours a day, you either need 2 battery packs. One you can just switch out with another one, which has a whole bunch of implications that why that won't work very well. Or you need twice the number of trucks.
Got it. Yeah, these are good points. I'm thankful that you're bringing them up. I think there needs to be more coverage of this type of stuff because, listen, I'm not a truck operator, but I get the practicality that is needed for a fleet manager. Fleet manager doesn't care how sexy the truck is.
Not a bit.
They want to know, does this work? Does it deliver? What is the maintenance situation? How do I recover a truck? What happens there? I agree. 100%.
Well, we were talking today at those TMC meetings that there was that Tesla fire that happened a couple of nights ago. There, remember, burned for 4 hours. It's got a battery compared to a truck. When you put a 300 kilowatt hour battery, crash it, and it catches fire, how long is it going to burn for? And they today during the meetings, we have no idea how long something like that will continue. I'm not trashing Tesla here.
No. It's a valid concern. It's a valid concern. Yeah. I think that they're like when you're talking about these like the tech press, I agree. I think that they don't welcome this sort of conversation. Like I welcome it. So I'm a Tesla fan, but I am not blind. you know, and I still like gasoline. I have a 1978 motorcycle. I'm not switching that to electric. I mean, that thing's awesome. Tim here's got a Model A Ford. He still hasn't given me a ride in. What the hell, Tim? You know, like, I love all that stuff, and I think that the electrics are just interesting. So I think that in order for this to be a good transition, as far as not 100%, but like, you know, the people that can use the electrics get a chance to use it. I think that the press on the tech side needs to calm down a little and start talking to the old school guys.
They do.
And get on the same page 100%. Like, you know, turn a wrench or drive a truck before you say that a diesel's bad. Diesel's not the enemy. It's just a different option. I'm sure that the steam engine guys were not happy about the diesel guys.
Well, you know, the other thing
Can you imagine that to me?
The advances they've made in the last 10 years in emissions reductions with diesels are mind-boggling. Like 90% cleaner.
Because of the
20 years ago.
From my understanding, it has to do with the pressure in the fuel injectors, right? It's a higher pressure, a finer fuel or something.
Tiny little point of it.
Okay.
There's so much going on. I mean, I was talking to some people from Jacobs the other day. They make the engine brakes, the Jake brakes. They're now pioneering this system of cylinder deactivation, where they can run the truck down the road on 3 cylinders, 4 cylinders, 2 cylinders. And what that does, saves fuel, obviously, but it keeps the temperature in 2 cylinders or 3 cylinders much higher while the other ones are idling, and it keeps the after-treatment system hot. And when the catalyst in your after-treatment system is hot, it's way more effective. So if you've got a 6-cylinder engine going down the road at exhaust temperature of, let's say, 200 degrees Celsius versus one that's going down the road at 600 degrees Celsius. That'll stop. The hotter exhaust from 3 cylinders keeps the after-treatment system working so much better, and it eliminates all your NOx. Does a huge job on the particulate filter because it's trapping it all inside the trash can at the bottom of the truck. You look inside the exhaust pipe of a truck from 2007 up until now, it's clean. It's just like looking into a steel pipe. There's no soot, no smoke, no black in there anymore.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's not in the air anymore. It's not in the atmosphere anymore. Now it's in the diesel particulate filter, the trash can at the bottom. And the California Air Resources Board out there and EPA and CARB, they're on this massive mission now to reduce NOx, which is what creates ozone and smog in cities. It's nasty stuff. And you reduce NOx with this cylinder deactivation technology I was talking about. So not only have we gone from 5 miles per gallon in the 80s and 90s to 8 and 10 miles per gallon today, we've doubled the fuel efficiency, halved the fuel that's being consumed by these engines. We've eliminated or reduced the emissions by 98%. What's not to like?
Jim, that's not enough. No, I'm just kidding.
We're bleeding. It works. I mean, the industry has taken all kinds of slings and arrows for this over the years, but people who still think of this old 75 Freightliner fender flapper going down the road with smoke belching out of it, you know, this big fat drunken driver, that doesn't exist anymore. Look in the tailpipe of a 10-year-old truck and tell me what you see.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think incredible improvements, especially even on the buses when they do the compressed natural gas, is not even near what the diesels used to smell like when you're next to it, you know?
I've driven natural gas trucks too.
Yeah. Gary, what do you think of all this?
Oh, it's a lot to take in. Next door at the airport there, Amazon flies freight in and out, and the old shop that I used to work in, they're going a lot electric on cargo loaders and tugs and all the equipment around the airport. Yep. I think when they get that under wraps on a contained environment like that, then it may work better on over the road and continual use applications where the airport equipment's only used, part of a day, not all day. But there's some phenomenal things happening. Some of the guys that I worked with said the lithium batteries weren't holding up to cold temperatures. They were having issues with that. So
yeah, that's true as well.
It's all around us, and I was really amazed. It'd been 10 years since I'd been over there to the shop and looked around and how much things have changed in the last 10 years. And back to he was talking about emissions. It's all about application and where something's used. So like when SCR systems first came out and DEF, they bought buses, but they never got up to speed and got up to temp enough. So we were constantly having to regen and do fix emission problems with them because they ran around the airport at 15 mile an hour. So they were in their wrong environment.
It's still a big issue for city trucks and trucks with high transient cycles. Yep.
Yeah, you're right. You have to get them up good and hot and put a good load on them to get them cleaned out for sure.
Interesting. That's a good point. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. And then is that why they always have something on the radiator to cover it to get it up to the right temperature if it's too cold?
No, that's
I don't do that so much anymore, but
shutters on the radiators. Shutters would open up, the drivers would freeze, the cold air would come right through the engine compartment up against the firewall.
Oh, okay.
So they put the covers on, but yeah, they don't need them anymore.
Oh, that's so funny. That's how much I know.
The next cool thing they're working with is the airport's electric de-ice trucks. Now that's a major consumer there. They're concerned about battery life on those because the burner systems that heat the glycol and all the hydraulics and the drive trains and but that'll be pretty neat to get to see that stuff coming out.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Well, look, this is an endless topic. I think we covered a lot. Usually about now we hit stop on the recording and then we kind of, hang out and then just say our goodbyes. It's already pretty late, so I don't want to push it too long. I know people got work in the morning, but I really appreciate Jim, you coming in. This was awesome. And Gary, thank you so much for giving your perspective on the, from a shop teacher perspective, and always, Duke, Nick, Tim, and I guess the other guys were probably in here earlier. Let me hit stop on the recording. So Shop Class Podcast, we're here every Wednesday night. We got a different topic each week, and I'll see you soon.